Hi, and welcome to Boom It's on the Blockchain. We are in our 77th show, and today we've got a special guest, Nicki Sanders from Nerd United. How are you, Nicki?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. So normally when we start the show off, if you just give a little bit of background about yourself then, Nicki.
Yeah. So I am a director of engineering here at Nerd United, specifically kind of handling all like new Web3 research and development projects. I have a background as a blockchain engineer. I got into the space in 2015, so about 8 years now, which feels like an eternity, I feel. Before that, I did back-end engineering for like fintech and defense contracting. But yeah, once I started into the blockchain space, it wasn't even called Web3 back in 2015. I knew this is where I belonged, and I wasn't going anywhere.
Perfect. No, I've been looking up your background. So you work for tZERO, which
Yes.
we've spoken about in the show and a number of times, obviously being the first sort of, I would say, token exchange that was approved and listed the first token in the US as well. So can you give a bit of background about your time with tZERO? And this is the real early days of tokenization.
Super early. Yeah, that's really interesting. It was a really fun time because we started realizing, like smart contracts and the blockchain are a perfect technology to kind of solve some of the problems with the traditional financial system, specifically around securities. So we started kind of working closely with FINRA and the SEC on what a tokenized asset would look like. What are like the basic requirements for it to be legally acceptable versus how do we merge that with what the technology can do and trying to make it as decentralized and trustless as possible, and settled immediately, obviously. So yeah, what year was it? But I got to like learn how to write really good Ethereum Solidity smart contracts before there were a lot of tutorials. This was the early days, and the documentation was really slim. So that was definitely the wild, wild west. And a lot of like reading the compiler, things like that to see like what the language could even do, finding bugs and reporting them straight to the Ethereum Foundation, fun stuff like that. So I was able to help architect and implement our like tZERO's security token standard. And we ended up getting some patents on that as well. So I was able to get some patents on some security token standards, which is pretty cool, and got to help do the first deployment and issuance as well. It was a very high pressure situation in a room. There were not great tools at the time to do like easy token launches that there are now. We wrote our own kind of CLI tools, and we really did a lot of it manually, which was a huge adventure. And I think I aged like 10 years in those 2 days.
Yeah, perfect. And then just thinking of tZERO now, because a lot of people, we've been involved in sort of tokenization since like 2019,
Thanks.
but it's still so early in the market space right now for people to understand. And I know even these exchanges, the securitized Rialto markets, but they don't really have many tokens on them yet, apart from their sort of native tokens.
Yeah, I think it is still really early where people don't, or the market hasn't really caught up to why it's a good thing to tokenize these assets, what the benefits are. Maybe some of them don't want them to be tokenized because there's a lot of money made in that gray area, in the middle layers of the financial system, where the blockchain would kind of take care of a lot of those inefficiencies where some people are making money. So some people are quite incentivized to keep things how they are and not put things on the blockchain. And then people, like the people who would be buying these securities, don't really understand the importance of a digital security versus the traditional security system. It doesn't affect them in their daily life. So like, why do they care? So I just don't know if there's like that market pressure yet.
Yeah, and also to think a bit like, if you look at a digital security online and it's held in, say, a MetaMask wallet, to a lot of people out there, they think it's like a cryptocurrency. Yeah. But then they don't understand.
Coins are more referred to as a network. So that'd be the Bitcoin coin on the Bitcoin network, Ether on Ethereum. But then Ethereum, when it introduced smart contracts, really gave people the ability to create assets on the Ethereum blockchain beyond the Ethereum token or coin. A lot of them are called like ERC20 tokens, and that's pretty much just a standard, like an interface that's implemented in the smart contract that you just guarantee that that piece of code has certain functions in it. And honestly, that's really at the basic, that's what the security token in as well. It's the same as as any other token that people can deploy on their own. And then the difference is when these deployments happen, they're following like the SEC rules for the issuance, for the distribution. There's lockup periods. They follow the same rules as the traditional securities markets, but just with the technology of the blockchain being utilized to represent those assets.
And do you think that because of what happened to sort of FTX and the other exchanges out there, now the SEC are obviously coming after so many of these original coins and cryptos and stuff like that,
Yeah.
you think at the end of this, it's going to benefit the security token market because it brings more compliance?
That's a good question. And I kind of go back and forth on that, where I'm like, wow, even the stuff going on with Coinbase right now, with the Wells notice they got from the SEC saying that, hey, you guys are trading securities in an unregulated way, which Coinbase, is adamantly denying. And the SEC can't even quite define which digital assets are considered securities. So we'll see how that shakes out in court. But for me, I'm like, wow, like how interesting that tZERO, I mean, they went the really slow way and the really expensive way through with lots of lawyers and getting regulatory approval and acquiring a broker's license. I mean, that was obviously really burdensome and slow. I mean, everything in that system I feel is pretty slow, but it gives them really the edge on, like, the SEC can't come to them and say, you're trading unregistered securities, because they're like, no, we have a broker's license. We actually can trade securities. So that's kind of interesting. But but then, as you mentioned, FTX, that definitely put like a negative spin on the whole industry. It kind of really just made people associate blockchain, Web3, crypto with scammers and with people like stealing funds. That doesn't really lend a lot of confidence in the security and professionality and seriousness of the industry and the technology. So kind of good, because then you're like, oh, yeah, that was really bad what FTX did. That was really like, there's a lot of room for regulatory clarity and creating a smooth path for actual like legal security tokens solves a lot of problems. But then on the other hand, it's like, oh, why would we even mess with this technology? People just lose money and steal and rug pull, and so it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and then you find your politicians end up getting involved in it as well, which just doesn't help people. The people like Elizabeth Warren and all that. It's just very negative to the whole concept of blockchain, because they associate Bitcoin, blockchain, all these things, as you said, it's just as if it's just one thing.
Yes.
They don't realize it's this emerging technology that's coming from that. So can you explain a little bit to our viewers a little bit about the sort of smart contracts, blockchain, and these other developments out with this traditional crypto that we've been speaking about?
Yeah, so the smart contracts, it's really just, it's code that's deployed on the blockchain. So it's cool in that way because it's completely transparent and auditable. You can go look at the code yourself. You can watch all of the transactions happen and verify that things are happening how they're supposed to. And then as someone with a developer background, there's some negatives with that as well, because it is permanent. And people, like humans, are not very good at being perfect the first time. And so once it's deployed, there can be bugs. We hear about, exploits and hacks in smart contracts all the time because of bugs that were in the code. And once it's live, you can't really change it, and it's exploitable. So that's a little tough, and that is a bar that we'll have to get over to really bring legitimacy to the industry, and confidence in smart contract technology.
And so what do you think cybersecurity plays to that as well then?
I think it's a little different than like traditional cybersecurity, because it's more like code security. Because the actual like when I think of traditional cybersecurity, you're thinking about like internal systems that need to be protected against a breach, or someone getting in that doesn't belong. And with the blockchain, you're knowingly deploying code that you know everyone is going to look at and has access to and is going to try to exploit. So it's a kind of a different take on security.
Okay, perfect. So let me just bring in this just now. Now, this is Nerd United. I support Manchester City, and my little brother supports Manchester United. So if you called it Nerd City, I'd be more favorable to it. But I still like the name. So can you give a little background about like what your company does? I know you're director of engineering there, and the benefits of it. And then I'll just scroll through the site and ask a few questions as you bring it up.
Yeah, for sure. And I have only, like, full transparency, I've been here for about a month. And so I'm still, kind of getting my feet wet and digging into the company. But I've known about them for a while. They're local here to where I live. And I have a lot of friends that work here. But if I get something wrong, it is not intentional. But yeah, their background is the founder. Well, I'm trying to think of how to explain this. So the founder was one of like the co-founders of Zynga Games. He was early in Bitcoin. He co-founded Gala Games, the big like blockchain gaming platform, and obviously had great success with that, and realized like, oh, that's a really cool system of spinning up a blockchain with a specific use case and incentivizing like rewards, like earning rewards on that specific blockchain. So he has angel invested this whole project, which only started in January of last year. So it has grown. I think there's over 200 employees now, just in like less than a year and a half, where it's really like a blockchain incubator of sorts, where there's the core like development teams that work on the platform with the core blockchain technology, with like the wallet solutions, stuff like that. And then people with ideas on a company, on a use case for that blockchain, like specifically around like an X to earn platform, just in different forms. They come to Nerd, and we can bring them into the incubator, help hire them developers. They can use our internal developers, we can help them with the marketing, help them learn about Web3 and blockchain, because it's still kind of a niche industry, a niche technology to know. So we can really help drive that forward. And eventually the goal is for these companies to be completely independent and spin out and leave, like go get their own office space, be on their own, just where they got their start with us here at Nerd.
So is it something similar to like the Cardano Foundation and the way they're bringing companies in as incubators to sort of build blockchains and build technology on Cardano?
Yeah, very similar. Uh-huh.
Right, that's interesting. Yeah, because I just saw that. So he put the $100 million funding into the project to basically kick the whole thing off.
Yes, all by himself, the one angel investor.
Yeah, that's perfect.
It's nice because then you don't have a board that you need to talk to. It's just one person.
One person to complain to, basically. So it's are you running your own type blockchain? Have you developed your own one like Cardano and Polygon and all these things, or are you operating on top of Ethereum, or how does it work?
It is a fork of Ethereum where we have changed the consensus algorithm, and then we deploy an individual blockchain for each of the venture companies. They each get their own chain, and then we help deploy their bridge so they can bridge their tokens to and from Ethereum.
Right. And where do the tokens actually trade then, or are these just tokens? So how does it work from there?
Yeah, most of them aren't really being traded yet. They're still pretty early stage, but they are they have, you know, they have they're the native coin on their own blockchain. And then when they bridge over to Ethereum, they bridge into an ERC20 token, which there is a market right now. I think you can get them on Uniswap, SushiSwap. It's everywhere. There's some of them are like Galvin and Switch are the two big tokens of all the companies right now.
And they'll be able to go into like Coinbase eventually and Binance and all these places.
That's the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know Uniswap, if anyone's been onto it, it's a bit of a minefield, really. You don't realize how many tokens are on there until you actually go on there as well, you know?
Yeah, it's a problem. Like, good luck finding something. Yeah, I think we need to be a little bit better at directing people where to purchase them. I just know that hasn't been like the priority yet. They're not trying to make money off of these tokens. They're trying to really incentivize the rewards, and then, you know, they'll come up with like actual utility for these tokens, less so than just people trying to do a pump and dump or make it into a meme coin.
Yeah, so it's more to do with the technology it's running on, really, than just people creating sort of different types of crypto out there to run these things.
Yeah, we're being really careful to stay far away from it being a security.
So it won't be a secure. So they're going to just operate as like utility tokens or DAOs, or how would they actually operate?
I do believe that a lot of them are organized as DAOs, and yeah, they're trying to use it as a utility token that will be able to be used in the system, where you get rewards for running nodes to help mine on the blockchain. You'll get rewards for that. You'll get rewards for participating in whatever company that owns that blockchain. And then they'll come out with a lot of interesting things to do with those tokens within their platform.
Yeah, and if just for our viewers to understand, can you give your sort of definition of a DAO and how it actually works?
Yeah, so a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. That seems like just buzzword salad, but it's a group of people. It's a community it's autonomous. It runs on its own, and there's no specific leader. Everyone kind of can help shape and just help make decisions for the group. Usually there's a common goal. Either there was the Constitution DAO, where a bunch of people got together and threw together funds to try to buy a copy of the Constitution. And then there's DAOs that are acting like companies, where they're like, we are autonomous. We're going to vote, like every person that's part of the group can vote on which decisions are made and the direction that the group goes, which is pretty interesting. Utah, where I live, just recently came out with some interesting legislation around DAOs, because from a legal viewpoint, until now, they're actually treated like a partnership, general partnerships, where every person that is a part of the DAO is independently and collectively liable for the actions of the DAO. So like, if you are part of a DAO, technically, a decision is made, someone steals funds, something nefarious happens, you could individually be sued for that and be liable for that action. Some like Wyoming, some states have come up with like an LLC wrapper to kind of get legal protections and actually like a defined entity for these DAOs. And Utah actually just came out with a new business classification for DAOs that is more than just an LLC wrapper. It acknowledges it's a different kind of form of a group, and that it needs limited liability. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think for people to understand that, you know, if you own tokens in a DAO, it's on-chain blocking system. So you would actually go onto like a sort of blockchain voting system. You would log in, depending on how many tokens you've got. Essentially, that provides your weight in the vote. And usually they're looking for over 50% or 60% of the vote to go ahead with some sort of project there as well. But what's interesting about that type of online blockchain voting system, and I had someone from India on last week, and they said they've started to use that for sort of cities and districts in India now for actual voting. You know, so it's amazing that's coming there as well. And, you know, I'm originally from Scotland, but been coming to America for years. And, you know, every single election that comes up, the other guy claims the other one cheated and they lost the vote, whereby this type of online blockchain voting system could actually clear that up. What are your thoughts on that type of technology?
I love that. I love when people are coming out with real world applications for blockchain technology. I think when there's the hype train behind the technology, sometimes people are shoehorning it in a little bit, like, oh, we're going to do this, but on the blockchain, where, I mean, at the very core, a blockchain is a slow, expensive database. If you don't need a trustless system, you don't need anonymity, you don't need permanence, and you don't then don't use a blockchain. But stuff like voting and community ownership, stuff like that is such a perfect application for blockchain technology. When I was at tZERO, the venture fund that owned tZERO is called Medici Ventures, and they had a vested interest in another voting company, blockchain voting company here in the US called Votes, who actually went and they had some really successful live tests where they were actually doing small local elections with their blockchain voting system, and it was super successful.
Yeah, I think it brings a lot of trust. I think that's one of the things, that the fact you can log on and see your vote counted on chain from an individual perspective, your vote's counted. So I think that makes a huge difference nowadays, especially, you think the last election and how many court cases did Trump bring up to say he'd lost, it's just like endless, you know what I mean? So, but whereby if everyone could go on and see their own vote, okay, you could claim there was some sort of tampering involved, but it's not the same as now, because at least there's that mass transparency to the whole thing.
Yeah. How nice would that be if you could just go and check and just, there's no trust involved. You can actually go check and verify on your own. So nice.
Perfect. So let me bring in this next slide here. So it's the Utah Blockchain Coalition. So I know you're heavily involved in this. So can you give a bit of background on, how long you've been involved and what does the Utah Blockchain Coalition do?
Yeah, this started up probably like a year and a half ago, where there's this guy here in Utah. His name's Tobin Gardner, and his wife Amelia is involved with local government here, and they're huge blockchain fans and advocates. And they realized that other states had blockchain coalitions, which are like almost not exactly, it's not lobbyists, but definitely like proponents of the technology, where we can go into the state legislatures and be seen as experts, when these new technologies can be kind of confusing for our legislators and politicians. So really creating an organization of experts for them to rely on to help push forward appropriate blockchain legislation, we thought would be very important. So Tobin started this up, and I was one of the founding members. I was an executive board member, and then in this past February, I was voted in as the vice chair. So yeah, I do a lot with that. We get reached out to by government officials. We get reached out to by different groups, like different special interest groups that will want to know about this technology, and we can be seen as experts and provide expertise in the field. We've gone to there was a meeting recently of all the county recorders here in Utah, and we were able to send representation to do a presentation explaining blockchain technology. I got to meet with a representative from an organization representing local credit unions here, and they were curious about the technology and how they might be able to use it and utilize it. So it's just really cool opportunities like that where we can be publicly available, be out there, bring in a lot of the Web3 and Web3 adjacent companies in the area in Utah to come together and help push our agenda forward as a team, as a unit, in our Utah legislature.
And do you think Utah, because I know obviously Wyoming is, probably the forefront of essentially the legislative part of it. Mm-hmm. But, there's nobody lives in Wyoming, basically. So it's like,
how useful is it?
I know that's not fair, but there's 400,000 people in the entire state, basically. So I wouldn't say it's a hub for the technology development. But there was a lot in the past, there was a lot of companies from Silicon Valley moving out to Salt Lake City. Mm-hmm. And now I think California is going to be a little bit slower. Do you think Utah could potentially be the sort of hub for America for blockchain technology in Web3?
That's definitely our goal. We have, like, it's kind of dubbed out here, called Silicon Slopes versus Silicon Valley. A lot of companies out from the Bay Area have set up shop and different offices out here in Salt Lake because we have a really good technical community out here. We have a lot of educated people, really strong workforce with a lower cost of living from Silicon Valley. So it's kind of a nice little change. Beautiful, like, people love to move out here. We have beautiful views. The mountains are right there. We love it. So yeah, we're really trying to position ourselves, especially with our work with the Utah Blockchain Coalition, to push Utah forward as the leading state to be friendly to blockchain technology and to be encouraging it.
Yeah, because when we had Frederic from the Cardano Foundation, he advised me, I think in the last 6 months, they've had essentially up to 1,000 US-based companies coming to Switzerland, who are US-based, but because of the legislation, the difficulty getting involved and stuff like that, they're just moving out of America. We're just losing talent and technology there as well. So how do you think the Utah is going to basically start to encourage them in, whereby legislation and say the East Coast, West Coast are driving them out?
Yeah, we can try our best to make this a really comfortable environment and safe environment for crypto and Web3 companies. There's some things we can do at the state level, different sandbox laws we can put in place to kind of skirt and allow people to play around with different financial systems without, running into regulatory issues. So there's definitely little sandboxes that we can carve out. And then on the federal level, if we can demonstrate that this is successful and show that this is a legitimate business and these are legitimate companies using legitimate technology and that is not all scams, it's not all rug pulls, hopefully we can be kind of a petri dish for that and a good example for the country. And hopefully, a lot of federal laws happen are they see how things work in the states and then they can apply it to the federal level. We're hoping that is able to happen. And then we need to, contact our federal, legislators. We need to reach out. We need to make sure that they know that this is important to us, because otherwise, how are they going to know to fight for it if they don't know that their constituents care about this?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. And then obviously when CEO of Coinbase, he was talking about, if you're just going to drive me out of America, I'm just going to basically move operations there. But, you don't want the huge companies moving out of America, because then how does it encourage the other companies below to sort of keep developing on the back of the technology? So where do you see the landscape over the next sort of 18 months, 24 months then?
I'm a little worried, to be honest. Especially with the current actions being taken against Coinbase by the SEC, and their response came out that it was pretty vague. Of sometimes they were like, "Oh, we're here to enforce the rules, not make the rules," but then sometimes they're allowed to make the rules. It's not really clear, and that's pretty frustrating, because if what Coinbase is saying is true, which I have no reason not to believe them, they have been very, very open with the regulators about what they're doing, about asking for regulatory clarity, about being very careful not to be trading unregulated securities. And they still got dinged just because they're so open about it and available. So that to me was really frustrating. I'm hoping, I hate these things being decided and these rules being put in place through the judicial system, but I feel like that's what the SEC is kind of pushing for. They don't want to make these decisions. They're hoping to punt it to the judicial system to kind of make these rules and decide if Coinbase is trading securities or not. So I think that it's going to play out in these next few months, and hopefully it's favorable to the crypto space.
Yeah, because I know from Frederic from Weirman from the Cardano Foundation, and out in Australia now, they're going out there. He's out there advising them, and essentially, so you've got the CEO of the Cardano Foundation going to deal with their regulators and advising them the best way forward with this technology. And it just seems a little bit backward here that we're trying to apply rules from essentially from like 50, 60 years ago to a technology, you know,
It
it's like,
doesn't make sense. No, it's very frustrating, especially when people in this industry, I mean, there's obviously going to be the people who are trying to skirt the rules and are playing in this gray area to take advantage of it. But then there's big companies like Coinbase, Gemini, I mean, the big players that are like, they are completely trying to be like fully regulated, fully transparent about what they do. And they want to be following the rules. And they're literally asking for clarity on these rules and asking like, they're asking for what rules they should play by, and they're not being given that information. And then they're getting punished for not following these unknown rules. That's just very frustrating.
Yeah, no, exactly. It'll be one of these narratives that keeps going on, but you just hope that they find some sort of solution to it, because, you know, as the bigger companies move abroad, it's just going to be America's could miss out in this next technology wave. It's like it's the start of the internet all over again, and it's just a lot of people realizing, if they don't think about it, but you know, it's this next, you know, to a lot of people understand it's like finance on the internet. Yes. So it's like, this is finance on the internet. Everything's going to change with this technology, and 20 years from now, it'll be into absolutely everything. So why would you want to be taking your biggest players out there, essentially shooting them in the foot? Exactly. They're big enough to go and operate anywhere. You know?
They don't care. Like Coinbase has even said, they're like, we'll go if we have to. And I think they recently just set up an entity outside of the US, you know, I think out of necessity. They need to hedge their bets here. But they've openly said, like, we want to stay. We want to follow the rules. Just tell us what to do. So that to me is so frustrating. And then I wonder if companies like tZERO can come in and kind of fill that interim gap and be like, okay, we have a broker's license, or we have an exchange license. We can help with this and make you completely compliant, and maybe like smooth it over until that regulatory clarity comes out. I'm really wondering how that shakes out, and how all of this confusion and regulatory like murkiness, if that really is, it's good for tZERO. So on a selfish side, I'm like, all right, like, come on, tZERO, do something. Like this is the problem that you can solve. So I'm kind of excited to see what happens.
Yeah, they're definitely positioning themselves in a good position depending on what happens going forward. But, you know, you think of, well, there's Switzerland really pushing itself, and, you know, it's the traditional banking in the world. But I know London now, the UK, it's becoming more difficult to get cryptocurrency trading licenses, but they're wanting to basically make themselves a blockchain crypto hub by bringing regulation in there as well. I read recently, and I've spoken to people out in Hong Kong, where everyone thinks, oh, China's coming in. They're pushing things down there, but now they're starting to open up there as well and make it encouraging more and more companies to come in there. So it could be one of those ones where, you know, if they don't get something sorted shortly, it'll just be Hong Kong, London, Switzerland. These places will end up getting a jump ahead of like, but it should be like New York should be the place as the finance capital of America to be running this whole thing, you know?
We would, in the US, we love to be these, like the technology, like forefront. We want to be on the cutting edge, and for like the regulation to be like hampering that development as someone with a technology background, like that's so frustrating, because what a miss. I feel like they are on the wrong side of history, and hopefully we can pull it off before it's too late.
Okay, perfect. So just as we're coming along the podcast, you know, I just want to bring this article just to get your viewpoint in about, this is in Cointelegraph, obviously, it's the premier website out there for people who are interested in crypto. So this is AI meets blockchain, revolutionizing smart contracts and cryptocurrencies. So I'm just interested to get your viewpoint on this as a smart contract developer back in the day, whereby, are you going to be replaced by this robot type person down here, you know?
I think I see AI as being a great tool for developers. In some of the new software development I've been doing, I wrote into GPT to give me a good framework to start with. So helpful, takes care of a lot of the boilerplate things, but honestly, it's often incorrect. It's just what I've seen. So I've gone in there and there's bugs. It doesn't compile. So you have to play around with it. So I see it as a great tool. but I could see like junior developers, if they're trying to get away with just using AI, they're going to be at a huge disadvantage because they're not going to learn why their code isn't compiling, what the issues are, what kind of optimizations they should be making. We're not quite there yet on the AI side. Maybe we'll get there, but I see it as a great tool, just like a great IDE has like IntelliSense and can help kind of throw in some basic things so you don't have to actually type it out yourself. I feel like this AI stuff is just a layer on top of that as a tool, but it definitely doesn't replace a developer who knows what they're doing and someone who even like knows how software systems work and can implement them.
So where do you think AI is going to play with Web3, the metaverse? I know you do a podcast in the metaverse as well. So going into that space, how is the AI going to be influential in that?
I'm really curious about this as well, because I see them both as, very cutting edge emerging technologies. I think a lot of people kind of put them together a lot as AI and Web3. How much overlap do they actually have? I'm not really sure if there's much. I could definitely see them being complementary to each other, but essentially they're very different things. AI is, using a ton of data to make decisions and storing a lot of data. Whereas Web3 and blockchain technology is a trustless system that's moving as quickly as possible and is really bad at storing data because that's very intensive and very expensive to do on the blockchain. So they're really, to me, two very different technologies. And I am really curious how they'll come together. I've seen a few different companies that are coming out with, with decentralized AI systems, which I'm really curious to see if that works, because data storage on the blockchain isn't always the best use case for blockchain tech, but I could be very wrong on that, and I'm excited to see.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that as well, because people don't realize that hashing stuff on the blockchain can be incredibly slow.
Yes.
We tokenized the first well interest back in 2019, and we built this platform, and there were the developers from India, and there were good developers and stuff, and it was, we took about 2 years building this platform to basically carry everything through, and it was just testing, and it was like well interest going all the way through. But the problem was, once you start putting any sort of traffic on it, it just becomes like incredibly slow. And then it becomes the point is, do you really need to hash absolutely every transaction on the blockchain? Because it became like we created something that was a sort of data monster for just a few well interests for transparency. And if you were going to apply this to every single barrel of oil that was coming out of the ground, it becomes like a pointless exercise, that type thing. So there's a sort of balance in there from things coming onto the blockchain, with doing the databases. So just to finish off, can you give a bit of clarity to where the blockchain comes in with databases and where you see this, and what should be hashed in the blockchain and what can continue to be in back-end databases, and how would that all work?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I'm really bullish on a lot of these layer 2 technologies, or just side chains to Ethereum, as an example, where they're using like zero knowledge proofs to kind of condense the data down and save it on the Ethereum chain, so you can go backwards and verify that it's correct, but it's not saving every single detail on Ethereum. And people are doing that with databases as well, where you're pretty much like hashing the data and you're like, okay, I can verify that this transaction hasn't changed because it still hashes down to the same value. I think that for me it's just an interesting spectrum. I'm like, all right, how decentralized is this? How trustless is this? And what is your tolerance for a trustless system? Because if there is some wiggle room where you're like, well, this doesn't need to be completely trustless. We can have a little trust here. We don't have to have it super exact. It gives you a little bit of leeway to keep things off chain. Whereas if you're dealing with a system in my opinion, like the US, like stock exchange, it would make sense for everything to be on chain, nothing off chain, all the trustless. We don't trust anyone. I want to see everything happen on chain. So it's kind of a scale on the use case and the tolerance.
Perfect. So, that's just coming out in the podcast now then, Nicki. can you want to finish off on how people could get in contact with you and what other ventures you're involved in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm really active on there. I'm also on Twitter. My handle is at Nicki Sanders. Love to post there. You know, some really good information, some news with my take. I post the articles that I write on there, and then also, you know, have a little bit of fun and put some polls and being a little silly, of course, on, you know, it's Twitter. So I do that, and then I do, you know, some consulting and things like that on my own time as well when it happens. I haven't really had the time to do it right now since I've been starting a new at a new company. That takes a lot of my time, but I play around with that a little bit here and there for the right projects. So yeah, if you are interested in that, like reach out to me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and I'll let you know if I have the bandwidth.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show today, Nicki. That's been great.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem at all. Thanks to everyone out there. You've been watching Boom It's on the Blockchain. My name's Alistair Caithness. Have a nice day.